Hi everyone, I can't see anyone in the waiting room. Bavika, do you think I should start now? Thank you. Hello everyone. Welcome to the third in the series of webinars on skills and principles for good conflict management. My name is Frédérique Blanc. I am the governance coordinator at Amnesty International Australia. My co-moderators are Eiko Lin, the chair of Amnesty International Taiwan, and Bavika Solanki from the movement building team at the International Secretariat. Today, we are joined by our guest, Mark Batson-Barrow, a conflict resolution with Mediators Beyond Borders International. Mark will talk to us about conflict competency for leaders, 5 essentials for a relationally strong workplace. Before we go any further, I would also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I live and work, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation here in Sydney. I acknowledge that the land was never ceded, always was and always will be Aboriginal land. I pay my respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to any First Nations person on this call. So this webinar series is part of a program of work to support conflict competency within the movement that is being run by the Movement Building Program at the International Secretariat. In 2024, Amnesty adopted a new conflict resolution process which focuses on the importance of early intervention and relational means to resolving conflicts. The process offers a step-by-step guide for handling and resolving conflicts. The Movement Building Program has established an internal network of colleagues who are able to offer guidance on conflict resolution. This network is known as the Conflict Resolution Resource People, or CRRPs, and Eiko and I are part of this network. In addition, an external roster of expert conflict resolution practitioners has been recruited who can offer ad hoc direct support to help with conflict resolution, coaching, and capacity building. Mark is one of the experts on the roster. At the end of the webinar, we will share details of where you can find out more about the conflict resolution process, the CRRPs, and the external roster. This webinar will last 1 hour, which includes a presentation of about 20 minutes by Mark. The Q&A function will open as soon as the presentation is finished. Please also feel free to raise your hand and ask questions directly at that time. To facilitate the Q&A session, please edit your Zoom name to include your Amnesty International section or structure name. And finally, as a reminder, please keep your microphone muted unless you are given the floor. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the Amnesty Leadership website after the session. Before we begin, we all know that conflicts are complex and multi-layered, especially ones that have been going on for a while. These webinars are just a starting point for talking about conflict, knowing that complex conflicts can take many months and sometimes even years to resolve. Our conversations are merely scratching the surface. On that note, Mark, thank you very much for joining us today. We are really looking forward to your presentation. Over to you.
Thank you, Frédérique. Very, very nice to be here. And good day, good evening, good morning, good middle of the night. All sorts of different folks in different time zones here. I'm glad to be here. Thank you. I have been working with MBBI, Mediators Beyond Borders International, since 2007 or 2008, but just as its founding, and I've done projects all over the place and have enjoyed every minute of it. I'm so glad we're teamed up with Amnesty International to do this work. And so I want to do a little bit more of an introduction on myself to get into the workplace piece a little bit, and then just talk about where we're going to go, and then get into where we're going, and then take as many questions as I possibly can, or as we can as a group here, to work together to answer what's appropriate. I became a mediator after an engineering career back in 2007, and hung out a shingle in the Bay Area of California here in the United States right around that time. I graduated in 2009. and did a lot of straight up mediations. What I mean by that is all workplace mediations where things had gone terribly bad, bad enough that they called in an outside mediator and were willing to pay for it. And did that for about 4 or 5 years and had a nice group of people. I had a little team I was working on. Everything was going great. And I came to realize that one project that I was doing in particular was a small startup. There were about 20 people in the startup. They had millions and millions of dollars of funding. Three of the founders on it were best friends when they started the startup with a really brilliant idea. And by the time the mediator was called in, it was way too late to save the company and to save the relationships. And it was really, really hard for them, and it was hard for me at that point. I'd seen a lot of bad things happen in companies, but this one in particular, the relationships really didn't feel good to be part of that, and to realize that there are certain tools, and mediation being one of them, can't fix everything. The co-founders ended up going into therapy together after the company was sold off for much less than they wanted to, and a couple of them became friends again. But they lost pretty much everything they had in that business and a lot of stuff personally. It was at that point, the reason I tell that story, it was at that point that I started to investigate getting ahead of the conflict curve, getting ahead of these crises, and starting to work on what you all are working on, addressing conflicts early, going into training more, doing ombuds work where conflicts are addressed as early as possible, and working with groups like Amnesty to address conflicts as soon as possible, so trust isn't broken and all sorts of bad things that come with conflict don't happen. The flip side of that, and I'm going to get into this, I'm going to share my screen in a second here. The flip side of this conflict dilemma, if you will, crisis, is that I've come to know conflict. I am in it every day, and I love it. And I love it for the people in the workplace that have learned how to grab onto it and use it and be able to work with each other with it. Because now I work with some teams that are so forward-looking and so high-performing that they're asking for more conflict on the team. They want to be able to use it to be able to get ahead and get ahead of the competition and be able to finish projects and do more good in the world and all of those types of things. And I think conflict is at the centerpiece of that, having those conversations. So that's what today is all about, is going into, I'm going to share my screen before I go any further here. Um, and I'm going to encourage here, folks, I see we have about 25 people. If you have video, love to see your face. Let me start that up right there. You should all see a screen that has a bunch of people. They're either fighting or they're dancing. I'm not really sure what they're doing on that screen, but there it is. Everybody can see that? Thumbs up? Yeah, okay, great. So here is where, uh-oh. Okay. So basic agenda for the next 20 minutes. I want to talk about what is conflict. I want to have a brief discussion of these 5 essentials, and I'm going to take them kind of in order. The fifth one being the most, I believe, the most important. Go into questions and answers, and then we're going to have a closing. We're going to do all of that in less than an hour here. The I think the other thing I should point out here, well, let me do that in a second. Let me bring this down. So let's talk about what is conflict. Pay attention here because you're going to be asked a question, a little quiz in a second here. So conflict, just so we're all on the same page on what we're talking about today, at least in this discussion, as a verb, as an action item, it's to be compatible, incompatible, or at variance with somebody else, or perhaps another organization, or perhaps another state or nation, or whatever the case might be. As a thing, as a noun, it's typically some kind of a disagreement or an argument that is protracted, something that's been going on for a while. That could be days, it could be weeks, it could be years. One of the conflicts I got involved in early on had been going on for 16 years and nobody had been doing anything about it. So they all fit within this definition. So here's the question for you to answer in the chat. This is going to keep us facilitators busy here, I hope, is where do you, so answer this in the chat, please. Where do you live and work? And how many conflicts have you encountered in the past 6 months? Where do you live and work? And how many in the last 6 months? Oops. Huh. How big a conflict? Countless. Yeah, not that many. Who else? Answer that myself in the last 6 months. 3 a week. All right. Yes. Edmonton, Canada. Mexico City. More than 30 varying degrees. One per day. Big and small. Yeah. At least one per week. Yeah. And I know I gave those definitions really quickly up there, just to help out. This might be something at work. I've asked the question. Maybe it's something at home. Two big ones. Uh-oh. Okay, there's a story behind that. Thank you, Gabrielle. Big one is secretary and secretary. Okay, we're getting into specifics. All right, that's okay. West Coast Canada, maybe within 6 parties aware of it. Thank you all for chiming in here. This is great. This is really great. Yeah. So I'm going to keep moving as people start continue to enter there. The I think the point is here is that whether we know it or not, and depending on our styles and our backgrounds and how we've interacted in the world, most of us are exposed to many conflicts per day. And most of those are so minor, we're just kind of dealing with them, but we're working through that on an individual basis. Many of the ones that we experience that we're probably being listed here, two big ones, there's a few per week, that kind of thing, we're engaged in, we're actually making a response to them, we're remembering them. So I'm going to ask you right now is to just bring one of those to mind, and maybe one that you're not necessarily involved in, one that is not yours. Maybe it's somebody else's. Okay. I don't want to bring the mood of the group down too much here, thinking about these things, but think of a conflict that you know about. And keep that in mind as we go through these 5 essentials here, okay? And see maybe how they would have applied, or maybe how one of them or more than one of them would have maybe helped out in the situation, okay? So let's keep going here. So we're going to go through the 5 essentials are, and this is giving up all of the research that's ever been done on conflict resolution in workplace teams and outside of workplace teams, compacting it down into 5 essentials. And it really reflects back on what I've learned over the last 15 years or so in this work too. Feedback, absolutely critical. Knowing yourself in conflict is as critical, if not more, than the feedback. Number one, having some kind of a de-escalation model or way you approach de-escalation of conflict in your team is also critical. And then building a culture where repair or resolution is valued is kind of a foundational element to building trust and being able to have all of this other stuff work. And spotting conflict early and stepping in constructively is the one I want to focus a little bit more time at the end of this presentation on. And I know that's where Amnesty is coming from. So let's keep going. This is where I told the facilitators with me here today, keep me going here because I like to drift off. But giving feedback and why it matters is that we've probably all given feedback that has not gone over well for one reason or another. And it might not help relationships. It might not help the project. And it seems really, really obvious. But most leaders that I've met, the ones in crisis and the ones that are super high performing, have never taken the time to do a super simple exercise that actually works with the team to figure out how they take feedback best on an individual level. And so the main point here is it's not how you want to give feedback, it's how the other person receives feedback. Sorry. It's how the other person receives it. Here's the simple exercise. The simple exercise is to sit down with a teammate or sit down with your entire team and go around in a circle and ask, before people are in conflict, ask them, how is it you get feedback best? How is it you're able to take critical feedback, in particular, negative feedback? And how should I approach you when I need to give that? And here's how I like to get feedback when you need to approach me. So, a really simple tool. It's at the top of the list. And in the sake of time, I'm going to keep going. Second essential, knowing your conflict style and your emotional trigger points is really critical to dealing with any kind of a conflict, whether it be somebody on the road that's pushing you in a different direction when you're driving, or somebody in your work team who's driving you in a different direction that you're not happy with. Knowing what is pushing on you and knowing how you react to these things is critical. And most of us, if we know about these things, we're working on them, and it's a work in progress. It definitely is a work in progress. Most of the people, I'm betting most of the people you work with, and maybe many of you here on this webinar, have probably never taken an assessment and done a deep dive into what your conflict style is. Each of us has a go-to style that we tend to use, and it's not always appropriate. And each of us here has points, things that others do, or sometimes things that we perceive that others are doing to us that impacts our identity and threatens us and turns us, it pushes our buttons basically, or can pull us into conflicts on a regular basis or on a long-term basis. And knowing yourself is really critical to actually getting out of them, and also making it so you're not having a reaction to it, but you're being proactive, and having choice basically in the decisions you make with your team. So essential number two. And if anybody's taking notes, the Thomas Kilmann instrument is the number one in the world. I think tens of millions of people have taken it at this point, so it's really baseline and benchmarked. It's a great tool. And then MBBI also does some webinars and short trainings on trigger points and hot buttons, that type of thing as well. So a couple of different ways to get to know yourself on that. Okay, de-escalate with compassion. We teach entire week-long courses in de-escalation. And the de-escalation tool that I want to just give you a glimpse of here in the next couple of minutes works across teams. It works across marriages. It works across project teams. It works across international groups coming into conflict with each other. And it's really basic. So when I show it to you, I hope you don't think it's too basic, but it works. And it's been taken from a whole bunch of different models and boiled down to basically 5 different points. And it's critical. And the fifth essential, addressing conflicts early, directly ties into this one, because if we let things escalate, the natural tendency is for them, as they start to spiral and escalate, as they get out of control. And at the end of the out of controlness is worst case scenario is physical violence. The other point that is not quite as bad as that is loss of trust in your relationships. And we're trying to catch it before it reaches that level. And so one of the tools, there are many of them out there. I highly recommend that you find one that you can actually use and go, oh my gosh, my team is in conflict, or I'm in conflict with this other project team. I need to do something. That you have one that fits your own style and your own way of looking at things. But here's one that I've used, I don't know how many times. It's used by mediators, it's used by facilitators, it's used by leaders around the world. And it is basically a 5-step plan. The first one is you check to make sure that the coast is clear, that it's safe to intervene. Nobody's going to get hurt either physically or mentally going into it. Nobody's going to be re-traumatized. There's none of that stuff's going to happen. If that's a go, go, then you move to the next stage, and that is the listening deeply stage. And that is letting them speak fully, getting everything that's going on for them out on the table, and using the next stage, which is empathy, is to actually get right in there with them, if you can, to try and really understand what's going on in their heart, in their soul, in their workplace, team, whatever the case might be. And then the fourth piece of it is to actually act. It's not just to sit and listen and empathize and make them feel really good. It's actually to take action. And depending on the situation, that action might be telling them what you can do and what you can't do. It might be, if you're the boss and they're the person working for you, to tell them this is what you're going to do from now on. It might be the action is we need to have more meetings about this and develop a consensus around this. It might there's a thousand different things that fourth piece can be, but it can't be skipped. That piece is absolutely critical and to de-escalate a situation. And you might get to the end of all this and it's not de-escalating, and so you need to start all over at the top and repeat that process. Yeah. So there's one model that is um, I don't want to say foolproof, but pretty darn good and proven through theory and research. Yeah, this speaks for itself, but it's especially an organization that's doing the work you all are doing, is we're de-escalating to try and restore that connection and not lose trust in one another. So small teams, big teams across the organization, whatever the case might be for you. Yeah. So this is the one I can't push hard enough, I guess, and it's why we're all sitting here today, I think, is this one. I don't know how many of you would agree, but build a culture where repair or resolution or conflict engagement is actually coveted and something that is seen as a positive, not as a micromanagement, not as a culture that is trying to control, but one that is trying to heighten tensions in certain circumstances in order to develop really good ideas, and through those heightened tensions be able to learn how to wrestle with those tensions and not destroy relationships. And it's really critical. I have seen it work well so many times when organizations do exactly what you're doing, is get trained up in this stuff, live it every day, learn about ourselves, do the 5 essentials, that they're able to accelerate and really be able to build on the good thing that they already have. So the word avoidance, I'm going to just point to this right now, is one of the 5 conflict styles. If we go back to the essential number 2, if you have done an assessment, you might find out that you have a conflict avoidant personality. I happen to score in this top percentile of 95 back 17 years ago, I guess it was now. And I've been able to get that down to about a 75%. And so I put that in there just because sometimes if we have an avoidant personality, this is really, really hard. Slide number 4 is like, I can't do that. There's no way I can do that. It's impossible for me as a leader to do that. I need to find somebody else to do that. And if you can practice and get to know yourself, it is possible, and your teammates will maybe not love you for it, but at first, but they will eventually. Yeah. Um, and just some roles here. It's a coaching role, a leadership role. Some of the words we use here: recognizing and praise early efforts. Yeah. So let's go on to number 5. And this is the one where, all right, we have theoretically 3 minutes to do this, but I'm going to beg my co-facilitators here for a little bit more time on this section, just a few minutes, okay? um, So this is absolutely critical. When I first got into this work, I discovered a model or a diagram, a way of looking at conflict that starts in the upper left-hand corner as regular old relationships, let's call it. And in high performing teams, it's actually creative tension, we call it. So people are really getting along well. They've got great ideas. They're butting heads against each other. There's conflict constantly, but it's good conflict. And that curve slides down through a series of events, through maybe bad feedback practices, through a little bit of avoidance, something can slide down to the opposite end of the curve and vary between just kind of bad relationships down to not really getting along, to impasse in negotiations, to losing trust is the big one I've talked about a couple of times already, all the way down to mediators being needed, police being needed, armies being needed, and of course, at the very far end of the scale is violence, which we're always trying to avoid. And if you do cost analysis, risk analysis, and all of that type of stuff on that curve, everyone is better off addressing the conflict early. It's not always possible, but in most of the workplace situations I've seen, it's been addressed too late. Either somebody didn't spot it, or somebody had their intuition go off months before and didn't do anything about it, and so that festered and turned into something bigger. So I wonder, the conflict stories that you might have in mind right now that I asked you to think about at the beginning, where do they fit on that curve, or where did you notice, or where did the people you're um, getting that story from notice when the conflict first started to happen? And did they start to de-escalate? Did they start to dive in? Did they start to address it, or did they wait? Did it take a little bit longer? And did anything get broken down the line? So yeah, there's your leadership lens. Let's go into questioning here on this. So again, in the chat, and this worked great last time. Thank you. And I see Sydney, daily with children, weekly with work. Thank you for that comment I hadn't seen before in the chat. And everybody else's too. So what, just a little bit of engagement here around what is it leaders can notice in their work team to identify conflict early? What kind of things might you see? Have you seen? Are you seeing right now? I know a couple of those comments, two big ones going on right now. And I know I keep saying work teams. It might be outside of your work teams. You're seeing something going on. So what is it that's yeah. So quiet, right on. Back channels of conversation. Yep, you're not hearing everything. Self-isolating from their teams. Yep. Yeah. What else? What else? All those really common. They can notice gossips, indifference. Yep. Gossiping. Why is that such a big one? I hear that all the time and see that all the time. Yeah. Yep. What else? Emails that sound a bit passive aggressive. Yep. Vocal and criticizing others' work. Yep. Yeah. If anybody wants to just speak up, that's fine too. Exceptionally vocal and criticizing others' work. Interesting. Yeah. So that's something going on for them. Inequalities. Okay. Yeah. I'm going to put mine in there. I was in a class really early in this work, being led by one of the best instructors, I think, in the world, Suzanne Terry. And she stopped me at one point mid mediation, and I had something going on in my head, like I thought something was going on over here. And she asked me, "Why aren't you doing anything about it then, Mark? You're the mediator. You have to do something about it." And we basically figured out it was my intuition that was flaring, and I didn't really even know I had intuition, but it turns out all of us do, and it's something that you can really count on in these circumstances. Racism, yeah, undercuts racism and veiled in critique. Interesting. These are getting into some hard conflicts. Okay, yeah, or at least some hard signs. Yeah. Anything else anybody wants to put in? I'm going to pop to the next slide here. Um, yeah. Thanks for all that input, and feel free to keep putting things in here as we continue to talk about this. Thank you. Different opinion of everything. Yeah. Yeah, so some of these you've said withdrawal, whispered frustrations, maybe that's gossip, sarcasm. Silence does not mean resolution. This is teams go quiet. It's not a good thing. Yep. One of the things that I've seen a lot of leaders do on a regular basis is these low-key check-ins. It's one of the ways to kind of figure out what's going on. How's it going? What's going on for you? And then you might end up getting yourself into a situation that's a little uncomfortable that you've got to de-escalate or you've got to really listen deeply and take some kind of action on. But it's better than waiting and losing a relationship. Yeah. Staff choosing to rather than go to the office or work after two with the team. So there's a little bit of code going on there. I'm not sure what the acronyms are. Um, Echo. Yeah.
Work from home.
Yeah. Okay. And so do we have a pro tip? We don't have a pro tip. We do have a pro tip. And I know, again, this is months worth of training that could happen to how to do this, but normalizing this early engagement, it's really, really critical, especially if you're a leader. And I think most of the folks on here are leading people or leading projects of some kind. Um, you're not micromanaging. You're just trying to head off bad things at the pass and making sure that you can grab onto these good things and use conflict to your team's advantage and your organization's advantage. Yeah. There, we went a little past, but not too bad. Yeah. Hopefully, that was new information, or some of it was new information for some of you. I know some of it's really, really basic if you've been in leadership for a while, but it really doesn't hurt to get back to these basics. And I hope you have some questions here. Love to dive into anything you would like to talk about, and maybe I'll stop my share now. Does that work for you, Frederic? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. There we go. Yeah. Yeah. How's everybody doing? And I hope I didn't bring everybody's mood down with that original thing is think of a conflict because it does. But anyways, I'm coming at from the angle. Conflict is great. Let's talk about it.
Femina has raised her hand. Would you like to ask your question, Femina?
Yeah, so I have two thoughts, but I'm just gonna give one now so other people can talk. When you had your slides up with Clear, we use something very similar. One of the things that I advise staff and folks members to do is to pause beforehand and
Mhm.
take a breath, to calm the central nervous system down, to give you time to think. Um, do you have any advice about those pauses that during, as you're going through the letters of the CLEAR?
Yeah, it's a great one. Uh, Yes, and that's usually the first thing you want to do in the clearing of this of the de-escalation process. So you're right. The neuroscience behind it is that when we all get triggered, when somebody's escalated to the point where they need de-escalating, the adrenaline, the serotonin, the different things that are going through our system take 20 minutes to clear out of the average human being. Some takes less, some takes more, and so creating that pause is absolutely critical in some cases. So if you're seeing somebody that's not only escalated and they're just having a conversation that is they're mad, they're furious, they're really wanting to make their opinion heard, but they're red-faced, they're sweating, they're stomping up and down, they're slamming doors. That's somebody that needs a break. And you might be at that stage too. You might be at the stage as the person that's with them where you're starting to get escalated and absolutely need that break. So the hard part then is if you know that and you can think about it in the moment and not escalate things further, is how do you call a break in the middle of that? Yeah. Anybody have any ideas on that? I know one good idea on that. Anybody have any ideas on that? Raise questions in the chat. Yeah.
And do
Yeah.
it with me. I didn't realize it until I thought about it much later, but I thought, oh, that was really clever. Um, I was really emotional. I was starting to get ready to cry,
Yeah.
and I was upset. And the woman that was talking with me, just like all of a sudden started asking about my pets and started talking about,
Yeah.
her pets and the
Yeah.
funny things, and it distracted me enough, and it,
Yeah.
calmed me down. And
Yeah.
later, as I walked away, I was like, oh, that's what she was doing. But I thought it was really clever because I was ruminating and starting to spin, and just getting more and more and more
Yeah.
upset, and her switching the subject so quickly like that into something that is very disarming, at least for me,
Yeah.
that you knew that helped me.
Brilliant technique she used on you. That's wonderful. Yeah. Storytelling, distraction, whatever the case might be to get the pressure off you for a little bit. Sometimes that goes over great. It worked well with you. Sometimes people say, don't tell me that right now. Yeah. And somebody's got to walk away or call a break is another way to do it. In that moment. One of the best things I've seen teams do is the same as the feedback conversation. You all sit around, ask the question of each other, how do you best take critical feedback? And you write it down and you get to know each other in that way. Is to come up with a pre-team agreement around the idea of, okay, I know myself at some point I'm going to become a little hot. I'm going to become a little escalated. I'm really passionate about whatever it is we're doing and talk as a team on the neuroscience on how you can create a 20-minute break and have that okay. Most of the teams I've worked with that create team agreements have that built right in. When stuff really goes bad, it's okay for us to take a 20-minute break or even a 1 day break and then come back to that conversation without offending everybody and without or anybody and promising to come back. So there's a proactive way to go about it too, Femina. Anybody else have anything they've seen on that question? It's a great question. Yeah. Okay. All right. Assuming I'm not missing any chats here. Yeah. Any other any other things you want to drill into on any of these topics?
Mark, sorry, can we go to the question from Oriana? So if we scroll, Oriana from Mexico, what is your suggestion when someone denies there's a conflict going on?
Gotcha. Great question. Sorry, I didn't see that. I'm not seeing it. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So I'm picturing the situation. You're in a team or in a situation and you're sensing that something's going on and somebody else is saying this is not a conflict. This is not this is no big deal, or I don't know what you're talking about. Sort of a situation. Is that what I'm reading here with the question? So this goes into the realm of how we're having this becomes, I guess, in the realm of a difficult conversation, having some kind of a tool for a difficult conversation. I'm going to give a long answer to a short question. Whole nother training again. But if you get into theory and you get into research around how difficult conversations go well, this might be the base for a difficult conversation where you've got something going on, they are denying it, and the first stage of that difficult conversation is to name whatever's going on with that individual, get them to a point where they can listen, where you're sitting down, where it's planned somehow that you've got their full attention or that group's full attention, and describe what you are experiencing without judgment. Just the logistics of it is explained to them. The second part of it is to talk about, and so that's without judgment. That's a key part of it. The second part of it is to talk about how the behavior or whatever's going on is impacting the general situation. Part 2A, the second part of that, is to talk about the impact that that's actually having on you. If you're willing to go that deep, if you're on a team where you've got those relationships and you want to go deep, what is the impact that it's actually having on you? How is it hurting your job or hurting your career or hurting your project or hurting you emotionally or whatever it is? So you've gone down into this lower level, the impact that's having. And then the final piece is that action piece we saw in that CLEAR model, is to ask for some kind of action around it. So in this situation, you've got a conflict denier, let's call it. You've explained, here's what's going on around me that makes me think this is a conflict. Here's how it's impacting the work around me and what's happening. Here's how it's personally impacting me, what's going on. This is why I'm calling it a conflict. Those are my data points. They're my data points. It's how I'm perceiving things. And here's what I'd like to do about it. I'd like to sit down and talk with you more. I'd like you at least to think about that. I mean, there's a bunch of different things in the action stage. So that's one technique. And boy, we've got 26 of us here that probably have all sorts of different great ideas. Anybody else have any ideas on how to answer that question that you've got somebody that's denying there's any conflict at all? And I will say, I was one of those. I scored 95% on the avoidance. I did. So remember, many folks out there don't see conflict. And certainly from a cultural standpoint, there are some cultures that are work through conflict on a constant basis, I guess, and rise it to the top. And there are other more conflict avoidant cultures that we end up working through. And so some people, even if there is conflict, don't see it. Or when there isn't conflict, they see it. I mean, there's all sorts of different ways to look at that. Yeah. Any thoughts? Training or sign a code of conduct might be a last resort. I'm just reading these now. Sorry. These questions in the chat room, active listening. Yeah. That active listening piece is maybe part of the methodology I just brought up about a difficult conversation. I'm just looking at what Kim, you just put in there. Active listening never hurts as part of a difficult conversation, or part of a regular conversation that's not difficult. Yeah. Just may not want to admit it. But Meena, you want to say more about that? It could be an issue of psychological safety, why a person may not want to admit it.
Sure, I'm in the States, and as an African-American woman, I see this from some of our staff who are Black and brown folks that might have a conflict with one of their white colleagues and are afraid to highlight it or bring it up because they don't want, there's that fear about that attention being brought to that individual because of the hyper invisibility of being a person of color in a predominantly white space. And so sometimes folks say that because they just don't feel safe. And maybe they've had an experience before where they've sat down and talked and it didn't make things better for them. It might have made things worse. And so they just.
Yep. Yeah. So the question that comes to mind for me then is how in a group like that, if you've got some folks that are not feeling safe, how do you create more safety in that team? I mean, that's always the leadership question, right? Yeah. And the issues you're bringing up are not simple ones to help people feel that way, to feel safe. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm trying not to just blow over that piece, Femina, because this is a really important topic. But as the temp training, sign of code of conduct might be the last resort. Interesting, yeah. Power imbalance between both parties. Let's talk about power imbalance here. Frederic, you've got a question or seeing something?
Yeah, actually, because I put that comment in, I can expand on it. But
oh,
I have
yeah,
a
please.
question. Yeah, I'm just saying. If the person raising the conflict is more junior than the person they have a conflict with, who is not acknowledging that there's a conflict, I think it's more tricky, isn't it? Like, Mark, would you have any suggestions on how a more junior person could identify a conflict that is not taught about?
Yeah, boy.
But I've got a
That
separate question to that after this.
Yeah, that's a hard. So I have I'm going to of course circle back to the 5 essentials in the difficult conversation piece here, which might be a good way of answering that or not. I wonder if anybody else has any thoughts on that. So you've got a boss subordinate sort of relationship, or somebody that's in a higher power position, and the person underneath is feeling like they're being pushed on, or there's some kind of a conflict there. How do they address that in a productive way, I think, is the question. Any ideas? Anybody got any ideas? All right, I'm going to just toss. Oh, okay, Susanna, and then I'll toss my idea out there, please. Hi there.
Well, I was just thinking, hi, Mark. I was just thinking, look, I think ideally, the workplace state that you'd want to get to is where a person, even in that situation, would be able to have a conversation and sit down and try and raise the issue. So obviously, ideally not in a non-confrontational way, but if there's ideally there would be sort of that scope to be able to sit down with the person, your manager or other more senior person, and say, hey, look, this is what I've been experiencing. And I'd like to talk to you about how we might be able to address that. But obviously that's not always the case. And so I usually encourage people to reach out to someone that might be able to assist, still in an informal sort of capacity. So perhaps like a HR member of the HR or people and culture team, or perhaps another trusted sort of person in the team that might be able to help sort of raise that issue and confirm that it's not being raised in a confrontational way. This is an issue that's really concerning and affecting the person that they need to raise, and perhaps trying to help them kind of have that conversation. So whether, drawing on someone else to help facilitate the discussion, but without escalating it to a complaint immediately, ideally to try and avoid, unnecessary kind of, sort of an unnecessary negative reaction if you can avoid it. But it is really tricky.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. Great answer, Susanna. Yeah. And what I took just out of what you just said there is there's maybe multiple stages to something like this. So if the person that's in the low power position has been trained in difficult conversations and feels really confident, they probably wouldn't be in this situation. But let's say they might be able to go in and just address it and use one of the tools we've already talked about, or use the difficult conversation tool I just talked about a few minutes ago to address this. But that probably doesn't answer Frederique's question here. And you did a great job on that. Is maybe it starts with talking with somebody on the outside. Maybe it's a coach through Mediators Beyond Borders International, or one of the Amnesty folks that are waiting for calls like this, so they can just think through, what should I do? Should I do anything? Shouldn't I do? How do I approach a conversation like that? What's that look like? From there, it might escalate where you ask and these are just repeating what you said. Maybe it's a colleague that is somebody that's going to help you have that conversation, or have that conversation for you, somebody you trust. Maybe it's HR. HR starts to escalate things, but it brings it up a level, but can be very, very helpful. A level above that, or maybe sideways to that, is some organizations have an ombuds, or somebody that acts as an ombuds to be a coach or help with those conversations. Some companies have whistleblower hotlines. If something gets really escalated, this can change the dynamic dramatically. So probably better off in those lower levels. But depending on the situation, you might need those resources. Yeah. So great. Thank you for answering that question for me. That took the pressure off me. That was great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark and Susanna.
Yeah.
My next question, so I'm aware of the time as well, was, Mark, would you have any advice on how to resolve conflicts between a paid staff member and an unpaid member or activist at Amnesty International? Because those conflicts can happen.
Yeah. Boy, it'd be fun to tease out the difference. So I have an organization I run that we have 30 folks that are volunteers and 5 of us as staff, and there's conflicts constantly, it seems like, just minor sort of little things. And I try to not view them as paid or unpaid, but there is a dynamic there that's different. I don't know how to answer that question. I think I need more information. Is that the question right from the text, right from the chat? Let's see.
I guess, yeah, it didn't provide much context. It probably would take a long time to explain, but
Yeah,
because members and activists are very invested in
Yeah.
delivering on the, the mission and strategic
Yeah.
priorities of Amnesty International,
Yeah.
they also feel very
yeah,
invested, and they might have different ideas to paid staff, and they do
Yeah.
work very hard and put in long hours. So
yeah,
you're right, I
yeah,
think the dimension of being paid, not paid adds a little bit of
yeah,
trickiness to the resolution.
yeah. I think in general, after having seen a lot of different situations, and this may seem like too simple an answer, is that the conflict between those two different types of people or types of groups should be treated exactly the same as any other conflict. Is how can you get in early? How can you create an atmosphere between, say, the activist or the person that's not being paid and the person that is, that creates respect, that creates a conflict atmosphere that you can talk about these things, that has pre-written agreements potentially on how you'll react with each other when you're in conflict. And then use the de-escalation tools and the difficult conversation tools that we've talked about here. But having that sort of stuff laid out before it gets bad, before the conflict rises to the level of needing somebody from the outside, I think is pretty critical. And that might be me being naive here, or not understanding the question, but I kind of view a team as a team as a team. Doesn't matter where folks are coming from, they're all human beings, and there are some commonalities to that, to our behavior. One of them being the capacity for empathy and is key to a lot of this. Yeah. What else? Let me just look through the text here.
I think Ignacio made a good point for what Frederic is talking about. I think often, like for the situation with activists and staff,
Yeah.
it can often be because they don't understand each other's roles. Like I think activists sometimes have this perception that Amnesty is a huge group of people and we have all these staff and we're all available to do a lot of things. So the expectations can be very high. Like they think that we have a lot of time to do a lot of things. I think they don't
Yeah.
understand how much capacity we actually have in our paid staff.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
sometimes that can mean their expectations are very high of
Yep.
what we will provide for them. So I think understanding the roles of each group can help reduce the conflict maybe.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. So that begs the question. So great, getting folks to understand your role, understand you personally, your group's role. How do you do that? I think it's a great answer, and I mean, it's not a trick question. It's just like how do you do that? Yeah, you sit down beforehand. Do you call a group meeting? Is it a facilitated meeting? Is it something like this where you all get together and invite folks from the outside? How does that work? There's a lot of different ways to do that. Restorative circles, role awareness, facilitation training. I don't know. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And again, somebody's putting up training there as possible as well. Yeah, yeah. These perceptions are so critical to this. I hope I wove that in to the presentation a little bit earlier, but each of us comes into this world viewing things from a slightly different angle. And those perceptions are important, I guess, to understand that we all have these different perceptions, especially when we're coming into conflicts like that. Their perception of your role might be actually 100% accurate from their standpoint, but maybe not from your standpoint or from your perspective. So how do you get them to be able to change shoes, as you will, and be able to stand in your shoes for a little bit. Yeah, I think it comes from conversation. I think it comes from conversations like this and little trainings that we learn little new techniques, and we go off and play with it and address them early and listen to our intuition. Yeah, yeah. Culture is where it begins for me. Yeah, that echo. I would do a face-to-face meeting with the activists if humanely possible. Yeah, yep, yeah. You want to add more to that, Echo? What are you thinking? The face-to-face is key there. Some of this, yeah.
Yeah, sometimes I think really face-to-face meetings, making a connection with the people with different views or opinions is the most important, just to make connections.
Yeah, yeah. And when you say face-to-face, does this count as face-to-face, or you mean like actually in person?
Actually, in person would be the best, but
Yeah.
if not, at least like Zoom or
Yep.
Teams meeting.
Yeah, yeah, okay. Yeah, this is, I'm going to bump that. I see a few texts coming up right now. Having worked with teams on team agreements many times now, one of the ones that we see in most teams is a conflict resolution escalation agreement, if you will, that has a lot to do with what you're talking about, Echo. Is okay, minor sort of a little thing, you can deal with it on Slack or on text or on whatever your messaging system, and then it escalates up from there to a phone call, to a Zoom meeting, to companies actually paying for people to get face-to-face to be able to resolve things. And then a step above that is face-to-face with a mediator or facilitator to help the conversation. So I think you're spot on right there. Potentially with this role one with the activists, maybe getting together face to face is critical. Yeah, yeah. Started running group induction sessions. Yeah, great idea.
Mark, very sorry
Yeah.
to interrupt you. We are at time. We are going to have to wrap up.
Yep. Thank you. And I think there's a little closing. Can I share that screen again?
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, if you could share the last slide of your presentation, that would be amazing.
Yeah, go down.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mark, and thank you for a great session. And thank you to all participants joining us today. I just wanted to let you know there'll be 2 more webinars in this series covering different aspects of conflict resolution and featuring more of our expert roster of conflict resolution experts. So we hope that you can join as many as possible or watch the recordings, which will be available afterwards, bearing in mind the different time zones. For more information about the conflict resolution process and the services available, refer to the links on that slide, and you can contact the Movement Building Program on conflict resolution, all in one word, at amnesty.org. So I think that sums it up for today. It's been an hour. It's been a great session. Thank you again, everyone, and thank you, Mark. Thank you, Bhavika, for joining us in the middle of the night for you. And yeah, look forward to attending the future webinars.
Thank you very much, everyone. Nice to meet you all, and I look forward to seeing you all one day, maybe face to face. That would be wonderful.
Okay, great, Mark. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Mark. Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.